Hey, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into something huge, our relationship with the planet's resources. Seriously, how is it shaping our future? This isn't just some abstract idea. It's about the phone you're holding, the water you drink, and some massive challenges we're all facing together.
So, let's kick things off with a question that, sounds pretty simple. Just look around you for a second. The water you drink, the gas in your car, the metals inside your phone, are all these things just free gifts from nature? I mean, it's a nice thought, right? But the real answer? Well, it might just change how you see everything.
Okay, so to really get to the bottom of that big question, we first have to figure out what a resource even is. And here's a hint. It's not just about stuff that's physically there, buried in the ground or flowing in a river. Nope. It's actually about a three-part test that involves our tech, our money, and even our culture.
All right, so here's the deal. For anything to be considered a resource, it has to pass three big tests. First, it's got to be technologically accessible. I mean, we actually have to be able to get to it. Second, it has to be economically feasible. In other words, it has to make financial sense to pull it out of the ground. And finally, and this one's interesting, it has to be culturally acceptable. Just think about it, right? A lump of coal was just a black rock for millions of years. It only became a resource once we invented the tech and built the economy to use it as fuel.
This chart here, it gives us a fantastic bird's eye view of how we classify all these resources. So you see that first big split right at the top, natural versus human. And then, if you follow the natural branch, you hit another key distinction. Renewable resources, think wind and water, versus non-renewable ones, like the fossil fuels that pretty much power our entire world. It's a really simple map that helps make sense of a super complex system.
So, hang on a second. If a resource only becomes a resource because of our technology, our economy, and our culture, well, that points to one absolutely essential ingredient we haven't really touched on yet, and that's us, human beings.
And that right there brings us full circle back to that question we started with. And the answer is a big, flashing no. Resources are not free gifts, they are a direct function of human activities. We're the ones who transform the raw stuff of our environment into things with value.
Check out this diagram. It illustrates this point perfectly. You see who's right there in the middle? Human beings. That's us. We use our technology to interact with nature, and we build institutions, things like governments and economic systems, to manage the whole shebang. It's this three-way interaction that really drives development. We are literally the engine in this whole process.
But, and you knew there was a but coming, right? This incredible power we have, this engine of progress, it has a dark side. All this progress has come at a pretty steep cost, creating a whole world of problems that we're now being forced to deal with.
And you know what? It all traces back to that first flawed idea. The second we start thinking of resources as free gifts that'll just be there forever, we stop thinking about the consequences of using them. And that mindset, it's let us use them, well, indiscriminately, with no real plan or restraint.
This way of thinking has created three massive, interconnected problems. For starters, we're seeing the depletion of resources, a lot of the time just to satisfy the greed of a few. Then you've got this accumulation of resources into just a few hands, which creates this huge gap between the haves and the have-nots. And finally, all of this has kicked off huge ecological crises. We're talking global warming, pollution, land degradation, the works.
And the warning we get from the source material? Wow, it couldn't be any clearer. Listen to this. If the present trend of resource depletion continues, the future of our planet is in danger. I mean, that's not some minor issue. That's a serious, serious call to action.
So, okay, with a warning that stark, where do we go from here? What's the way forward? Well, the good news is there is a clear solution on the table, a path that offers a much more balanced and honestly hopeful future for all of us.
And that solution is all built around this one idea: sustainable development. Let's break this down because it's got two really important parts. Part one, any development we do today shouldn't wreck the environment for tomorrow. Makes sense, right? And part two, whatever we do now shouldn't mess things up for our kids and grandkids to meet their own needs. It's all about finding that critical balance between now and later.
And hey, this isn't just some theory from a textbook. It's a real global goal. A huge turning point was back in 1992. Concerns about the environment were hitting a fever pitch, so more than 100 heads of state got together in Rio de Janeiro for the very first International Earth Summit to try and tackle these problems head-on. And one of the biggest things to come out of that summit was something called Agenda 21. Think of it as a global action plan for making sustainable development happen in the 21st century. The core idea was brilliant. You simply can't fix environmental problems if you ignore social and economic issues like poverty and disease. It was basically a call for everyone all over the world to work together.
All right, so we've got this big global idea of sustainability and a roadmap like Agenda 21. But how does that actually translate into planning for the future? How do we get from these massive ideas down to local, meaningful action that actually makes a difference on the ground?
This next quote, I think, really gets to the heart of it all. It says, "We have shared our land with the past generations, and will have to do so with the future generations too." That just frames it so perfectly, doesn't it? We're not just living in the now, we're a link in a long chain. We're caretakers of this land, inheriting it from our ancestors and basically borrowing it from our descendants. That's a pretty profound responsibility.
And this slide right here makes that responsibility super concrete. It lays out the battle for our land in really simple terms. So look, on the left, you've got the stuff we do that causes the damage: deforestation, overgrazing, mining. But then, on the right, you have the direct solutions, the conservation measures we can take: planting more trees, managing grazing better, and controlling mining. See? For every problem, there's a direct, doable solution.
So, to wrap things up, I want to leave you with a little thought experiment. We've talked about global plans and big ideas, but let's bring it right back home. Just imagine for a second that the world's oil supplies ran out tomorrow. How would that affect your lifestyle? Think about your commute, the food in your grocery store, maybe even your job. Pretty much everything would change, right? It's just a stark reminder of how deeply our lives are woven into the planet's resources and why planning for their future is really planning for our own.